So this next part is, like I said, a really important part to understand, and so I'm going to drill you with a bunch of questions, and hopefully this will make sense. And in class, we're also going to do a bunch of questions on this to make sure it makes sense. Okay, so one thing that we've talked about is that molecules are going to have kinetic energy, which means that they're kind of always moving around, unless if they're at absolute zero, which is so low that, you know, we don't even need to bother talking about it for our purposes in this class. Now, what molecules like to do is diffuse down what's called a concentration gradient. So I'm going to draw something here. Hopefully you can see this. Okay, so what I want you to see here is, let's say we've got side A and side B. And so what I want you to see, or tell me, is what direction you think that these are going to flow. These little dots are molecules, and the line is a membrane. So hopefully you're going to be saying that they're going to go from A over to B. And when do you think that they're going to stop going from A over to B? Hopefully you're saying when it reaches equilibrium, right? So they're going to flow from high to low, and that's in order to make sure that they're going to eventually reach equilibrium. That's the basis of all the stuff that we're going to talk about today, so you want to keep that in mind. The natural flow is to go from high to low. So think about it like going down a hill, right? That's the natural flow, because of gravity, to go from high to low. Okay, so moving on. Ooh, yes, another thing. Let's say that I'm going to draw you one more picture. And this is not a football play, I'll tell you that. But it looks like it. Okay, we've got X's and we've got O's. And so what we want to think about here is that the X's are going to go from high to low, and the O's are going to go on their own from their high to their low. So that means the X's are going to go from left to right, and the O's are going to go from right to left. So the important thing to remember about that is that everything is going down their own concentration gradient, and they don't care about whatever else is happening with the other molecules. Okay? So that's going to be an important part too when we start talking about molecular movement and do some questions with them. So when we talk about that movement from high to low, that's going to be called diffusion. So diffusion is going to be the movement of molecules from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Okay, so think about membranes. Membranes are going to be what's called selectively permeable. And selective means that they're going to allow some things to come through, but not everything. And so the way that this is going to work is there's two types of transport that are going to allow things to pass. You've got passive transport, which if you think about the way that sounds, it's passive, right? It's just going with the flow. And so that means no energy is going to be used for that. And then you have what's called active transport. And active transport is an active motion, and you're going against the grain, and so it's going to require energy. So I always liken this to like the coolest nightclub in town, right? And the cell is going to be our nightclub. And everybody wants to get into this nightclub, okay? So let's make our cell. And the cell is our nightclub. And now we've got all of these dots on the outside. Those are our people, and they want to get in, right? So we can say that we have, ooh, wow, that's bad writing. We've got a high concentration outside the cell and a low concentration inside. What's the natural flow that these are going to do? Hopefully you're thinking that they're going to go into the cell, right? So that's going to be diffusion. Diffusion is actually going from high to low. Okay. So another form of diffusion is called osmosis. And osmosis is just going to be the same thing. I lost the cap to my marker. Oh, well. It's going to be, it's here. The same thing, except it's just water. Okay? Now, facilitated diffusion is going to be a little different. Let's say we've got the same setup. However, you're kind of nerdy. and the bouncer won't let you in. The bouncer's like, nope, sorry, you can't get in, right? But your friend's in there, and so your friend comes up to the bouncer and says, hey, they're with me, let them in. And the bouncer says, okay. That's facilitated diffusion, right? Your friend helped you. That they facilitated you coming into the club. So that's exactly how facilitated diffusion works. You've got something where it's got a high concentration outside and low inside, but it still can't get across that membrane. So it needs a protein to help it to get in. It's still going with the natural flow. The bouncer's still letting people in. It's just that that was a difficult molecule to pass, and it needed a protein to help it get across. So that's going to be facilitated diffusion. Now, the thing is, those proteins are specific for whatever molecule they're trying to get to go across the membrane. That makes sense, right? I mean, it's just like your friend, right? You can't just ask anybody like, hey, can you help me get in? They're going to be like, well, I don't care, whatever, right? So facilitated diffusion is still passive, though, because we haven't used any energy. You are still going from high to low. Okay. Now, the other type of transport that we're going to talk about is, active transport. So active transport is going to be what happens when you have this. Now there's a lot of people in the club, or a lot of that whatever molecule inside the cell, and it wants to get, these guys want to get in. Well, now we've got the high concentration inside the cell, and we've got low here. So really the flow should be from inside out, but you've got these ones that want to go from outside in. Okay, so let's say it's our nightclub and it's really packed, right? And the bouncer says, that's it, there's no way you can get in. I'm sorry, there is no way, right? There's always a way, right? You could pay the bouncer. You could pay the bouncer with ATP, which is energy, okay? So what's going to happen is these guys are going to be able to go in, but they have to pay the bouncer with, oh, this is going to be funny to see my... No, that's not bad. They have to use ATP because they're going against the grain. Okay, so that's active transport. Now, there is one last form called coupled transport. And if we're going to use the club metaphor, let's say you're standing outside, you're broke, you don't have any cash to give the bouncer, and as somebody's coming out, you see them drop a $20 bill, so you pick it up and pay off the bouncer with that, and you get in. That's going to be coupled transport. So let me put it in more cellular terms. So what happens is you've got, okay, you want to get in, and what happens is one of these guys comes out. Well, what happens is sometimes when one of these guys comes out, they actually are going to give up a little bit of ATP. That says ATP there. And so what's going to happen is this guy is going to use that ATP to get in. Okay, so that's going to be coupled transport. So you're still going against the gradient, you're still using ATP, you're just kind of mooching it from someone else. Okay, so let's get more into osmosis, because obviously that's going to be a huge factor with us because our cells are mostly water. So osmosis is going to be the transport of water from one side of the membrane to another. I actually did a really cool experiment with middle school kids where we worked with osmosis. I gave them a gummy bear, and we put it into a glass of water and let it sit overnight. And if you think about that, you've got a lot of water on the outside of that gummy bear, not a lot on the inside. And so what happened was a gummy bear like grew to like this big. It was awesome. And that was because all the water went in through osmosis. Okay, try it. It's fun. Now, when we talk about water movement, there are going to be rules. So it always is going to go from high to low, and there's going to be terms to kind of describe this. And so what we'll do is in that next section, I'm going to actually go over the different ways that water can move across a membrane and that solutes can move across a membrane.